The blizzard hit the mountain road at 11 that night, and it had not let up by 2 in the morning when Specialist Tomas Garrett's truck threw a dead alternator somewhere on the upper switchbacks of Route 9, 8 miles above Calden and 45 miles from the gate at Fort Renwick. He got out and stood in the snow for a while, flashlight in his hand, as if looking at the engine long enough might change what was wrong with it. It didn't. His phone had half a bar and then none. He was 19 years old, 6 weeks from his first deployment, and he had $40 in his wallet. He sat back in the cab and watched the snow come down and thought, for the first time in a long time, that he was in real trouble. The headlights came around the lower bend 40 minutes later. Not a truck, a tow rig, a heavy-duty flatbed with yellow running lights, moving up the mountain like it had a reason to be there. It stopped behind him. The door opened and a woman stepped out, maybe 30, slight in a heavy canvas coat, a knit cap pulled low. She looked at his truck the way someone looks at a thing they've already diagnosed. "Alternator," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't say anything else about it. She walked around, checked the road surface, pulled her rig into position without making a production of it, and had him chained and loaded in under 12 minutes. She worked fast and without wasted motion, the kind of efficiency that looks like boredom from the outside and is something else entirely from up close. Garrett offered to help twice. She said no both times. Not unkindly, just no. He climbed in the passenger seat. The cab smelled like coffee and motor oil. The radio was off. She drove the switchbacks down without hurrying, both hands on the wheel, and she didn't talk much, but when she did, she asked straight questions. Where he was headed, what post, what unit. He told her. She nodded. "First deployment," she said. It wasn't a question. 6 weeks, he said. She nodded again and drove. The shop was at the south end of Calden, a one-bay place set back from the county road with a hand-painted sign, Vassen's Auto and Tow, and a light over the bay door that stayed on through the night. She pulled his truck in, got a good look at the alternator, told him there was a couch in the back office and coffee in the pot. He offered to pay for the tow. She waved it off. He offered a second time. She looked at him in a way that ended the conversation. He slept 3 hours on a couch that smelled like old motor oil and woke up to the sound of the impact wrench and the smell of fresh coffee. It was 6:45 in the morning. The bay door was open and the mountain air was cold and clean and the snow had stopped. When he walked into the bay, she was buttoning the hood back down, hands already clean, a rag in her back pocket. "Should run fine," she said. He asked for the bill. She handed him a slip of paper. He looked at it for a moment. The labor line read 0. The parts cost read 0. At the bottom, in her handwriting, it said, "Drive safe." He stood there holding it. "I can't take this," he said. "You're not taking anything," she said. "I'm giving it." He tried a third time, told her he had money, that $40 didn't cover the parts alone, never mind the tow and the labor and the drive down the mountain at 2 in the morning. She listened to all of it without expression. When he finished, she said, simply, "I know," and left it there. She put her hands in her pockets and waited until he ran out of words, the way a person waits out weather they've seen before. Then she walked him to his truck, confirmed it turned over on the first try, and stood in the bay door while he pulled out. He watched her in the rear view, small in the doorway, the light behind her, the sign above her head, the mountains still white behind the tree line, until the road bent and she was gone. He thought about it for 3 months. It was the kind of thing that sits in a man and doesn't settle. Not the free repair, though that alone was more than he'd expected from a stranger on a mountain in a blizzard. It was the way she moved through it. The competence, the absolute absence of drama. Like pulling a stranded soldier off a mountain switchback at 2 in the morning was something that fell within the ordinary scope of a night's work. It nagged at him the way things nag when they don't add up, when the pieces are all there, but you keep feeling like you're missing one. In February, 6 weeks before his unit shipped, he mentioned it to his sergeant. Not fishing for anything. Just said it, told the whole thing, the blizzard, the alternator, the woman, and the tow rig, the bill that read 0. His sergeant listened without interrupting. "Vassen," the sergeant said when he was done. "Yes, sergeant." The sergeant was quiet for a moment. "You said she had a ridgeback hitch on that rig. I don't know what that is." "It's a military surplus recovery hitch. Not common." He didn't say anything else about it that day. But 2 days later, he stopped Garrett in the corridor and told him he'd made a call. Garrett asked to what? His sergeant said, just battalion. What happened after that? Garrett only heard in pieces. The way news moves through a post. Someone mentioned something to someone, a name was run, a record request went up the chain and came back flagged, and the flag caught the attention of the battalion S1, who passed it to the executive officer, who brought it to Lieutenant Colonel Harmon. Harmon read the file in his office with the door closed. He read it twice. Nora Vasson, age 30, called in Montana. Proprietor, Vasson's Auto and Tow. Also, youngest woman in the 35th Signal Brigade to hold the Army's Combat Communications Relay Accuracy Record. 2 deployments. A classified individual citation from her second tour that had been sealed and filed and apparently never reinstated to her standard issue record after a medical separation. A combat relay call she had run for 4 hours and 11 minutes through a jammed frequency during the collapse of Firebase Tallworth. Manually cycling 17 relay nodes under fire, keeping a communications thread alive through interference that had rendered every other operator on the net silent, until she had threaded a clean channel through and the extraction team had been able to talk the QRF in. 14 men out. The citation read, under direct fire and complete frequency denial, Specialist Vasson sustained critical communications relay for a duration and accuracy not previously recorded under comparable conditions. A commendation bar had been authorized. It had never been pinned. The record also noted that she had been medically separated 8 months after that deployment with a hearing loss in her left ear. A consequence, the record made plain to anyone reading carefully, of the sustained headset operation under the conditions at Tallworth. She had not filed a complaint. She had not reapplied for her commendation. She had simply left, driven to Calden, bought a one-bay shop from a retired mechanic, and opened for business. Harmon sat with the file for a long time. He read the commendation authorization twice. The date it was approved, the date it should have been pinned, and the blank space where the record of the ceremony should have been. There was no ceremony. The bar had been cut and packed, and it sat in a property book box somewhere, and she had been separated and driven to Montana and apparently not said a word to anyone. Then he made a phone call. The Tuesday morning in March was cold and clear, the way Montana mornings get in the shoulder season. Hard blue sky, frost still on the rooftops, the county road dry enough, but the mountains still white above the tree line. Garrett didn't know exactly what was coming. He'd been told to be at the shop at 9. He'd been told to wear his class A uniform. That was all. He pulled off the county road at 8:55 and stopped. There were 80 soldiers standing in the parking lot of Vasson's Auto and Tow. They were in 2 formations of 40, dressed right and covered down, in service uniforms, and they stood without moving in the cold morning air. The parking lot wasn't large enough for it, technically, and some of them were out on the shoulder of the county road, and none of that seemed to matter to anyone. Garrett found a place at the back and stood at parade rest and waited. The bay door was closed. There was no sign of her. El Teco. Harmon arrived at 9 exactly and walked to the center of the formation. The first sergeant called it to attention. 80 pairs of boots came together in the gravel and frost. Harmon knocked on the bay door. Once, twice. It opened. Nora Vasson stepped out into the cold morning in her work clothes. Canvas pants, a heavy shirt, the same canvas coat she'd been wearing on the mountain. She looked at the parking lot the way she'd looked at Garrett's engine in the dark, like she was diagnosing it, like she was already a step ahead of what she was seeing. She didn't say anything. Harmon told her name and rank, the rank she'd held, the rank the record showed. Then he told her what he had in his hand. He told her about Tallworth. Not quickly, carefully, the way a thing deserves to be said when it should have been said years ago and wasn't. He read the citation aloud into the cold air, his voice carrying across the parking lot and the county road and the still morning, and when he read the part about the 14 men extracted, he paused for half a second, just long enough for the number to land. Then he stepped forward, unpinned the commendation bar from a case in his other hand, and pinned it to her jacket. She stood straight. She didn't move. Her hands were at her sides, the rag still in her back pocket, and she looked forward at nothing in particular the way a person looks when they're keeping something very steady inside themselves. Harmon stepped back. He looked at her for a moment. Ridgeline, he said. That was her call sign. The name she'd used on the net at Tallworth for 4 hours and 11 minutes, while 14 men waited in the dark to find out if they were going to make it home. He raised his hand to the brim of his cover and held it there. The first sergeant gave the command. 80 soldiers snapped to attention and rendered honors to the woman standing in the door of her one-bay shop at the south end of Calden. She held it. She stood straight, and she held it without flinching, the way she'd held the line at Tallworth, the way she'd held the switchbacks at 2 in the morning in a blizzard, the way she held everything, with her hands at her sides and her eyes straight, and her jaw set and no performance in it, just the fact of what she was. Garrett was at the back of the formation. He was 19 years old and 6 weeks from his first deployment, and he was trying to hold his own salute steady and not doing a perfect job of it. Because now the pieces fit. The efficiency, the hands on the wheel, the way she'd driven the switchbacks in the dark without hurrying. The bill that read 0, the quiet refusal to take anything for it, the way she'd waited out his words like she'd waited out harder things. She had been running signals in the dark for men she'd never met, keeping a thread alive through noise and fire for years before that mountain road. The tow rig, the bay light on through the night, the coffee in the pot. He understood, standing there, that the stop on the mountain hadn't cost her nothing. It had cost her a night's sleep and 90 miles instead of parts, and it had cost her the way everything cost her, without complaint, without invoice, without anyone knowing. It was the same economy she'd been operating in her whole career, the same one she'd apparently decided to keep running after the Army let her go. The formation held its salute until Harmon brought his hand down. Then he turned to her, said something quiet that didn't carry, and she nodded once. A short, complete nod. The kind that means, I know, and it's enough. She looked for just a second across the formation. Her eyes moved to the back row. She found him, or maybe she didn't. Maybe he only thought she did. And if she recognized him, she didn't show it in any way that could be seen at a distance. But Garrett thought she did. He thought, for that 1 second, she looked exactly the way she'd looked in the bay door at 6:45 in the morning with the hood closed and the work done, the rag in her pocket, standing in the light while he tried to figure out how to thank her properly, and couldn't. He lowered his salute with the formation. He stood at ease and looked at the commendation bar on her canvas jacket, catching the light above the shop door, and at the mountain beyond the rooftops of Calden, white and enormous and perfectly still. The Army had taken 4 months to find its way here. She had taken 40 minutes in a blizzard at 2 in the morning for someone she'd never met. Garrett filed that away. He planned to carry it with him a long time.